The Setagaya slaughterhouse. 44-year-old Mikio Miyazawa was their first target. He branded Wi-Fi for Interbrand. Meanwhile, Yasuko managed a neighborhood tutoring academy. 8-year-old Niena loved dancing ballet. 6-year-old Rei, though soft-spoken due to a speech delay, was pure kindness. Come March 2001, they planned a total relocation, a brand new beginning for everyone. That dream died December 30th. A predator climbed through an unlatched second-story bathroom window into their lives. The ensuing violence was chillingly precise. Little Rei was smothered in his sleep before he could wake. Investigating the commotion, Mikio encountered a monster, armed with a razor-sharp sashimi blade on the stairwell. The steel tip snapped off deep inside his cranium. Yasuko and Niena perished while cornered in the loft. This is where things turned truly bizarre. Instead of fleeing the carnage, the slayer simply hung around. Forensics prove he loitered inside the house for up to 10 hours after wiping out the entire household. He raided the kitchen, gorging on 4 tubs of frozen dessert, using only his fingers. Utterly depraved behavior. He pilfered feminine hygiene products from the restroom to bandage the gashes Mikio managed to inflict. By 1:18 in the morning, he was surfing the web. Detectives suspect he even napped before daybreak. Living right next door, Yasuko's mother stumbled upon the gruesome remains the following morning. Here is the truly infuriating part. Solving this should have been trivial. Authorities collected over 12,545 distinct forensic artifacts. Police secured his genetic markers, prints, and his own laundry, left in a neat pile near the bodies. His size 11 Schlesinger kicks were from a manufacturing batch never actually released for sale in Japan, sourced from South Korea for specific overseas regions. Grit inside his waist pack originated from 2 distinct locales. One site was California's Edwards Air Force Base. Another was near a Yokosuka naval hub. His genetics showed Asian paternal roots mixed with Southern European heritage. 1 in 4 Koreans share his paternal markers, compared to 1 in 13 Japanese citizens. The knife's grip was bound in a cloth wrap specifically used by individuals from the Philippines. Why does this phantom remain free? The bottleneck is rooted in Japanese legal constraints. Local laws prohibit tracing suspects through family DNA databases, stalling any potential breakthroughs. Creating a facial sketch based purely on genetic mapping remains forbidden by current regulations. Global forensic breakthroughs remain legally out of reach for investigators working this cold case. 78-year-old retired detective Tsuchida still makes an annual pilgrimage to the family's burial site. He maintains that a genetic facial reconstruction would finally allow someone to name this monster. A quarter-century later, millions of DNA tests and prints have yielded exactly 0 handcuffs. During July 2025, Tokyo authorities initiated a desperate, groundbreaking maneuver. They petitioned Interpol, admitting the slayer likely fled abroad or wasn't a local. The house remains standing. A record-shattering 20 million yen bounty continues to sit untouched and unclaimed. This ice cream-eating butcher has successfully outrun the law for 25 long years. Setagaya remains an open wound, but our next mystery was cracked with a terrifying conclusion. The resolution was more sickening than the crime. Imagine a man liquidating 7 souls through proxy. He manipulated his captives into butchering one another. Meet Futoshi Matsunaga, born 1961, a man defined by what lawyers call demonic charm. By age 29, he'd already extorted 180 million yen via ruthless manipulation. Wealth was a side effect. He craved dominance. He focused his malice on poor Junko, a mild-mannered educator. She'd been in his orbit since 1982. When her mother, Shizue, protested, Matsunaga responded by brutally beating the older woman. He then weaponized that very assault to hold her kin hostage via blackmail. He slowly enslaved the entire Ogata clan, draining their funds while demanding compliance through electrocution. High-voltage currents ripped through them repeatedly until every ounce of will evaporated. He shrieked holy verses while inflicting agony, whispering that shadows were stalking them to steal their luck, blending supernatural dread with raw physical suffering. The carnage started in February 1996, when Kumio Taraya was tortured into his grave. This is the part that defies logic. Matsunaga manipulated the family into butchering one another. Takashi met a shocking end at the hands of his own daughter, Junko, who followed orders blindly. Her mother, Shizumi, was strangled by her daughter-in-law, while her own grandchild pinned her down. Her sibling Ryo and her brother-in-law met similar fates. Kazuya wasted away in a bathroom, while young Yuki was throttled by Junko's own hands. Every drop of blood shed made the survivors more complicit and utterly enslaved to his will. Once you've killed your mother, the world stops seeing you as a victim. Bodies were butchered, boiled, and flushed. Not a single bone remains today. This nightmare unfolded for years in a standard apartment surrounded by neighbors. How did the truth surface? It started with Kumio Taraya's young daughter. Taken captive at 10, she endured 7 years of hell until March 6, 2002. At 17, she finally broke for freedom. A previous escape attempt had only earned her more pain. But on this attempt, she successfully vanished into the night. She alerted the authorities, and the house of cards collapsed. In court, Matsunaga denied every horror. He viewed his prey as mere cash cows. Prosecutors called the case an unparalleled stain on the nation's history. Death row was the initial destination for both Matsunaga and Yuno Owata. However, the appeal brought a shock. The High Court commuted Owata's sentence to life behind bars. Judges ruled she was under total domination, a landmark shift in how law views victims forced into crime. Today, Matsunaga sits in a cell, awaiting the gallows. This case remains a grim global study on how psychological breaking points can turn ordinary people into monsters. While that family was destroyed from within, our next story reveals a whole community looking away. Junko Furuta, 17-year-old Junko, was just 14 days away from celebrating her 18th birthday. A factory worker with a bright future in electronics, her inner circle knew her as Jun-chan. She dreamt of pop stardom. On November 25, 1988, she was biking home after her shift. 16-year-old Shinji Minato knocked her down. Then 18-year-old Hiroshi Miyano moved in for the kill. Playing the Good Samaritan, he promised to guide her safely through the dark. Instead, she was dragged to a dachi ward. The 44 days that followed are too gruesome to recount. The records exist for the brave, but the basic facts are chilling enough. The 4 primary monsters, Miyano, Minato, Ogura, and Watanabe, were all just teenagers. Gang-affiliated dropouts, they had already committed a group assault just 2 weeks prior to snatching Junko. They forced her to call home and lie, saying she had simply run away. They even made her call the police to personally cancel her own missing persons report. The unforgivable part? People knew. Minato's parents were aware a girl was trapped in their son's room. They later claimed they were paralyzed by their son's temper and his underworld connections. When a tip led police to the door, the parents lied, and the officers left without a search. Those officers were fired later, but their negligence had already sealed her fate. Pure chance exposed the horror on January 23, 1989, during a separate arrest. Under pressure, Miyano mistakenly thought the detectives already knew about the girl in the drum. He confessed everything. Her remains were found encased in concrete on March 29, 1989. She was so unrecognizable that only her fingerprints could prove who she was. At her service, classmates left a heartbreaking note. Jun-chan, welcome home. I never imagined a reunion this horrific. It sickens me that I lived my life completely blind to the nightmare unfolding nearby. Here are the verdicts. The ringleader, Hiroshi Miyano, was handed 20 years, the absolute maximum penalty possible, without a life sentence. The other participants walked away with sentences between 5 and 10 years apiece. Legal experts clarified that according to the strict sentencing statutes in Japan, capital punishment is almost never used for a single victim. Furthermore, the state couldn't distinguish between a planned execution and fatal torture. Their youth also bought them mercy. The public was fuming, but the reality that followed was even more sickening. Once free, Joe Agura became Kamisaku. By 2004, he was back in cuffs for kidnapping and assaulting a new victim. He supposedly bragged to that captive about getting away with a literal murder in his past. He served another 4 years. Meanwhile, Shinji Minato took a new name, only to be busted in 2018 for attempted murder over a parking row. Out of the quartet, Yasushi Watanabe was the only one who didn't officially return to a life of crime. He passed in 2021 at 49. Agura died in 2022 at 51. The rehabilitation system meant to fix these kids failed. 3 out of 4 reverted to pure violence the moment they were released. The Furuta horror proved adults can be devils, But our next story poses an even darker, more twisted riddle. What happens when the predator is just a child? Welcome to the nightmare of the Kobe school slayings. Throughout the spring of 1997, a ghost was hunting children in Kobe's Suma ward. On March 16th, 10-year-old Ayaka Yamashita was savagely beaten with a hammer right outside a residential complex. A week later, her brain gave out. Then, on May 24th, an 11-year-old named Jun Hayes simply vanished. Jun was a boy with special needs. A stranger lured him to Tank Mountain with the empty promise of seeing a turtle. He was choked to death using his own shoelaces. 2 days later, Jun's severed head was found perched on the Tomagaoka school gate. A blood-red note was jammed inside the mouth. The message was chilling. "Let the games begin. Try and stop me, you pathetic cops. Killing is my only pleasure." The writer signed the letter with a pseudonym, Sato Sakakibara. The symbols meant alcohol, demon, rose, saint, and war. A week later, a second letter arrived at the Kobe Shimbun newspaper. He was livid that the press mispronounced his chosen name and demanded they fix the mistake immediately. Profilers studied the writing and concluded the suspect was likely a brilliant, highly educated man in his 30s. They were dead wrong. On June 28, 1997, the police cuffed a 14-year-old boy. The courts called him Boy A, but tabloids unmasked him as Shinichiro Azuma. The entire nation was left paralyzed by shock. Major news outlets reported a country consumed by agonizing guilt, grief, and deep national soul-searching. Focus magazine leaked his mugshot to the public before the government could seize the remaining copies. Doctors found no brain damage, but they diagnosed him with sexual sadism, conduct disorders, and a history of animal slaughter. He had butchered at least 20 cats before he eventually developed a taste for human blood. He worshipped a twisted god he called Bamoidoki, a deity born from childhood rage that he believed provided him protection. He felt zero remorse for his prey, even claiming it was Jun's own fault for being so gullible. Since he was only 14, he escaped adult court and was instead shipped off to a youth detention center. He stayed there until March 2004, less than 7 years. The Justice Ministry actually went public with his release. Usually, juvenile offenders get to hide their past, but the sheer terror of the populace forced the state to break protocol. 11 years later, a fresh horror ripped the scabs off those old, painful scars. In June 2015, Shinichiro Azuma actually released an autobiography titled Zeke, or Absolute Song. The pages were filled with gory details of his kills, even bragging that the crime scene was a thing of beauty. Within 3 weeks, 100,000 copies sold, netting him 10 million yen. Junhase's father, Mamoru, issued a statement. He stated that the publication was a direct, heartless assault on their family's grief. It proved the killer felt no soul-searching. Since then, he's fought for statutes to stop monsters from profiting from their atrocities. Japan still lacks those legal protections. Meanwhile, Azuma launched a personal site, showcasing his macabre and unsettling artwork. Reports from 2015 placed him in Saitama, hiding behind a fake name and earning a living as a welder. Today, he would be around 42 or 43. No one knows where he is lurking now. The Kobe tragedy rewrote Japan's legal code. By 2000, the threshold for adult prosecution dropped from 16 to just 14. Any teenager, 16 or older, who committed deliberate homicide faced mandatory trial as a full-grown adult. Yet, haunting questions persist. Is true redemption possible for a child who finds beauty in ending a life? Do they deserve mercy? And what is left for the victims when the predator eventually walks free? June 1st, 2004, the day Satomi Mitarai's world ended. It was picture day at Sasebo's Okubo Elementary School. 12-year-old Satomi followed a friend into a deserted third-floor classroom, where Girl A quietly drew the blinds. She pulled off Satomi's glasses and whispered her death sentence, a threat the victim mistook for a prank. Girl A sliced her throat with a utility knife. 2 sixth graders, both merely children, caught in a nightmare. The motive lay in a digital frontier unknown during the Kobe era, an online social hub called Cafea. It was a virtual playground of avatars and chat rooms, the digital haunt for Japanese youth back then. That May, the girl realized Satomi and others were mocking her online, calling her fat, pretentious, and a fraud. Satomi had even smeared her reputation on a personal web page. Demands for an apology were met with silence. 4 days before the strike, the killer marked Satomi for death. Her weapon of choice? A simple blade, inspired by a televised murder mystery. When the teacher realized they were missing at lunch, Girl A reappeared, drenched in crimson. Clutching the razor, she reportedly claimed the blood staining her clothes wasn't actually hers. Others heard her confess to doing something terrible. At 11, she was too young for the law to touch. Criminal charges were impossible. A family court simply ordered her into a secure facility. Judges found no insanity, just a monstrous ego fueled by an obsession with dark horror fiction. Later, she was identified as being on the autism spectrum. Sadly, this revelation cast a long, dark shadow over the neurodivergent community in Japan for years. Somewhere between 2008 and 2013, she was quietly returned to society. Her family vanished under new identities. But then, the story took a truly bizarre, twisted turn. Because of her University of Nevada hoodie, the internet crowned her Nevada Tan, a viral sensation. Online forums were flooded with cute anime drawings of the child killer, holding her bloodied blade. Total strangers were sketching fan art of a literal elementary school murderer. A German rock group even adopted her nickname before rebranding under pressure. The mania went global. While a family mourned their dead child, the web transformed her killer into a pop culture icon. 2 decades later, in 2024, Satomi's brother stood before a crowd and shocked everyone. He claimed hatred was useless, expressing a desire to live alongside her in peace. He simply wanted her to do better. Now in her 30s, her current face and name remain a mystery. If this chills you, hit subscribe to help the channel. Now, let's peel back the curtain on the next tragedy. The Sasebo schoolgirl horror. One sweltering Saturday in July 2014, 15-year-old Iwa Matsuo headed out to go shopping with a friend. She waved a final goodbye and stepped out into the sun. She never returned. Panic set in that night. Her parents, terrified, finally called the authorities. Investigators traced her path to a classmate's apartment, the same girl who had invited her over that day. The scene they stumbled upon inside would go down as Japan's most gruesome juvenile crime. The most terrifying detail? The entire world should have seen the disaster coming. This girl's history was a trail of red flags. Years earlier, she had spiked her classmates' school lunches. No fewer than 5 times, she tainted their food with chemicals like bleach and cleaning fluids. Then, just 4 months before the final horror, she ambushed her own father in his sleep. She beat him brutally with a metal bat. You have to wonder, what happened next? Her own doctor, sensing the impending doom, made a frantic call to child services with a chilling warning. Left alone, she's a walking death sentence. 6 weeks before Iwa Matsuo died, an expert foresaw the blood. Privacy gags silenced the doctor. The name stayed secret. The system stalled. That July, Iowa entered a peer's room and stepped into a lethal snare. The assault came from the shadows. Every move was calculated and cold. She'd bought a kill kit and studied legal loopholes at the library. Asked why, she gave a bone-chilling reply: a hunger to kill and dissect. Zero beef, no grudge, just betrayal. 2015 brought a reformatory sentence. The judge feared a real prison would shatter her twisted psyche. The nightmare spiraled. Within 90 days, the killer's father took his own life. One ignored signal, one unspoken name, one life traded for medical silence. Iwa knew her monster. Our next victim faced demons she'd never met. Strangers linked by the web, united for one sickening, singular goal: abduct a stranger and ensure her permanent disappearance. The dark side execution. Imagine the walk home. Familiar, dark, just like 100 times before. Then a van stops. August 24th, 2007. Ria was almost home, oblivious to the predators circling in a van, hunting for a solitary target. Yet, this horror story breaks every standard rule of criminal logic. These 3 killers shared nothing, not even a handshake before that week. The digital abyss bonded them, an underground forum called the Dark Site. August 17th. Kenji Kawagishi, broke and desperate, posted a digital call for blood. Van-dwelling and hopeless, he found takers. Tsukasa, a washed-up paper pusher. Yoshito Morei, a debt-ridden darts pro. A fourth accomplice was busted before they struck. Strangers fused by malice, drafting a blueprint for a random abduction. Abduct, loot, and execute. Ria Izagai was simply in the wrong shadow. At 10 p.m., he used a fake direction query to corner her. Blade to her throat, they forced her inside to bleed her dry. Ria's final act of defiance? Handing the predators a fake PIN code. Knowing her fate, she denied them everything. By dawn, she lay discarded. But the murderers left a trail they couldn't bury. By 1 p.m., Kawagishi broke, calling the precinct to beg for mercy. Cops had all three within 2 days. Then, a mother's crusade began. 333,000 people signed her petition for their deaths. Japan rarely hangs for single murders. The gavel fell in March. Mastermind Tsukasakanda met the noose in June 2015. Kawagishi dodged the rope with a life term for his early squealing. As for Hori, spared once, until old ghosts from a 1998 double-killing surfaced. Ria couldn't escape, but she ensured her killers walked away, empty-handed. A sea of signatures ensured the man who took her life paid in full. Ria fell to a week-long plot. Our next killer hunted for a year. Atrocities so vile they scarred the nation's view of an entire generation. The otaku slasher. Between 88 and 89, 4 girls vanished. Young girls, gone. No clues. Then, the taunting letters arrived. The culprit was Tsuto Miyazaki. His atrocities haunted Japan, forever poisoning the nation's perception of an entire subculture. Born into newspaper wealth on August 21, 1962, he was an outsider from birth. Premature at 2.2 kilograms, a rare defect left his hands mangled and fused. Tormented since age 5, the cruelty never eased, eventually causing his high school grades to crater. Rejected by his top college, he drifted into photo work as his isolation turned total. His grandfather was his sole anchor. When he died in May 1988, Miyazaki snapped. Trial records claim he swallowed the man's ashes, desperately hoping to resurrect him. 3 months later, he claimed his first life. 4-year-old Mari Kono vanished on August 22, 1988, his first prey. He struck Masami in October, Erika in December, and 5-year-old Ayako in June 1989. The violence grew. He kept morbid trophies until one twisted move sparked national panic. He mailed a mysterious package to Mari Kono's grieving parents. Inside were skeletal remains and photos with a note. "Mari's gone. Look closer. Fear me." Then, on July 23, 1989, the predator finally slipped up. Caught stalking a girl, he fled a furious father but foolishly returned for his vehicle. Police pounced. He soon confessed, leading to a home search uncovering nearly 6,000 tapes. Gruesome cinema and piles of illicit, stomach-churning footage filling every corner of his room. Labeled the Otaku Slayer, his arrest triggered a massive witch hunt against all animation fans. Fandom became synonymous with deviancy, prompting panicked parents to burn their children's collections. Shops shuttered as a decade-long shadow fell. His legal battle lasted 7 grueling years. Medical panels clashed over his sanity while he blamed a dark persona called Ratman. By January 2006, the High Court declared him fully aware and fit for punishment. Hanged in June 2008, he left 4 victims and a legacy of shame. These local horrors shook the nation, yet the violence remained within domestic borders. The following tragedy, however, would finally capture international headlines. A spirited English traveler arrived seeking thrills, unaware she was walking into a monster's path. 21-year-old Lucy Blackman was a striking blonde with a thirst for new experiences. Formerly a flight attendant, she sought a fresh start far away from the United Kingdom. Landing in Tokyo in May 2000, she began hosting at a lounge called Casablanca. Her duties: charm the elite, share drinks, and accompany them on lucrative dinner excursions. On July 1, 2000, Lucy stepped out for a date and vanished forever. A cryptic caller soon contacted her friend, spinning tales about Lucy joining a secretive cult. Not a soul believed the story. Her father, Tim, arrived and mounted an unprecedented search that put authorities on notice. He dominated news cycles, posted 30,000 flyers, and offered a 6-figure reward. He even took his desperate plea to the highest levels of British diplomacy. Leaders intervened. Yet the trail stayed cold until 3 women shared a terrifyingly similar story. Each had regained consciousness in a stranger's home, their memories of the night wiped clean. Evidence from sinister purchases, chainsaws, and concrete led investigators straight to Joji Obara. Born Kim Sung-jang in 1952, he inherited a fortune built on gambling parlors. He sat upon a mountain of family gold, an elite-educated tycoon who built a $38 million real estate dynasty. Behind the luxury lay a monster. Detectives found 400 tapes documenting his systematic abuse. His sick diaries labeled these brutal assaults as conquest play. Authorities estimate his predatory spree spanned 8 years, claiming between 150 and 400 victims. On February 9, 2001, 7 months post-disappearance, searchers stumbled upon her corpse inside a coastal cavern near Miura. The killer had butchered her, entombing her severed head inside a block of solid concrete. A court eventually convicted him of serial sexual assault and the 1992 slaying of Australian model Carita Ridgway. A chilling note in his journal read, "Carita Ridgway, excessive chloroform used." Shockingly, he escaped a murder conviction for Lucy. Decay made it impossible to prove exactly how she perished. Nevertheless, the monster was judged guilty of kidnapping and discarding her remains. The magistrate branded him a predatory beast wearing a human mask. Tim Blackman funneled part of the legal payout into launching the Lucy Blackman Trust. Now, supporting over 600 families of the murdered annually, her tragic end became a lifeline for others. The case ignited a global firestorm, exposing the dark underbelly of safety for foreign women in Japan. Yet just 7 years later, the shadows claimed another young British traveler in a hauntingly similar way. Bizarrely, this predator managed to vanish while standing right under the noses of 9 armed police officers. Her name was Lindsay Hawker. Lindsay Ann Hawker arrived, believing Japan was among the world's most secure sanctuaries. A 22-year-old biology scholar, she landed in 2006 to teach before beginning her graduate studies. Brilliant and hyper-aware of her surroundings, none of her intellect could shield her from the coming horror. Around midnight on March 20th, 2007, a predator named Tatsuya Ichihashi targeted her on a train. Spinning a web of lies about being her student, he shadowed her home until she gave in to pity. She cautiously allowed him inside for a glass of water, making sure her roommate saw his face. She agreed to a private tutoring session 5 days later, a fatal mistake that would end her life. Security cameras captured her looking visibly distressed throughout their final morning meeting. Claiming he lacked the 3,500 yen fee, Ichihashi lured her back to his flat to pay up. She told her taxi to wait, but when 7 minutes passed without a return, the driver simply drove away. Once inside, he struck. After her friends found his address on a scrap of paper, the authorities finally arrived. By 7 that evening, 9 officers stood poised right outside the killer's front door. Then, in a stunning lapse, Ichihashi walked out wearing a backpack 2 hours after the police had arrived. A policeman grabbed his bag, but the suspect wrenched himself away and bolted into the darkness. One man outran 9 cops because they lacked radios to talk between floors, a total systemic failure. The fugitive was a disciplined athlete and martial artist, capable of cycling 25 kilometers every single day. He melted into the city streets. Meanwhile, police entered his home to find Lindsay's lifeless form on the balcony. Her body lay buried inside a bathtub, packed tight with soil and organic compost. This sparked a massive hunt, lasting over 2 years and 7 months as the killer roamed Japan. Surviving on construction wages and nearly 1 million yen, he began a gruesome process of self-mutilation. He stitched his own nose to narrow it and used scissors in a public stall to hack off his lip. After slicing off his own moles with a blade, he eventually sought professional surgery in 2009. On November 10, 2009, a sharp-eyed passenger at a ferry terminal spotted him despite his new face. When police finally confronted him, he dropped the act and confessed his true identity. Fingerprints proved it was him, yet at trial, he dared to claim the killing was a mere accident. He insisted she died only because he was trying to silence her cries for help. The judge saw through the lies. Medical evidence proved he spent 3 minutes crushing her throat. He escaped the gallows, receiving life imprisonment because the court sensed a faint flicker of possible rehabilitation. Today, the monster rots inside the walls of Nagano prison. Under the current law, He won't even smell freedom for at least 30 years. Bill, her father, stood tall after the verdict, declaring that their 4.5-year battle for justice finally ended today. 9 crooked cops, 1 monster, and a catastrophic betrayal met their match in a family that never wavered. The chilling end of Shiori Ino. One Tuesday in October 1999, a 21-year-old student headed for the train, unaware it was her last walk, a path she had walked 1,000 times without fear. The 15-minute trek to Okagawa Station was flooded with people under the bright midday sun. At exactly 12:45, a figure lunged from the crowd. A blade tore through her twice. She collapsed onto the cold concrete. By 12:50, Shiori was gone. But this isn't just another murder. Shiori Ino spent her final months watching her own death approach. She drafted a will 6 months early. She even taped the predator's vile threats against her loved ones. She begged the authorities for a lifeline, over and over. They simply turned their backs. When the blade finally fell, those same officers fabricated a web of lies to trash her memory. This is the brutal reality of how a young woman's death unmasked the rot within Japanese law enforcement. It is the story of a father's 25-year mission to ensure no other girl suffers his daughter's fate. It began at a neon-lit arcade where she met a man calling himself Kazuhito Komatsu. He claimed to be a 23-year-old businessman, all a facade. He was 26 and sold flesh for a living. He managed a brothel alongside his brother, a man who masqueraded as a local firefighter. The moment Shiori tried to break free, Komatsu snapped. The psychological warfare was instant and relentless. Ghostly phone calls and stalkers at her doorstep forced this 21-year-old to do something truly haunting. She sat down and wrote her final testament. Imagine a college girl preparing her funeral because she knew she was being hunted. Yet, she refused to cower. She fought. On June 14, 1999, the Komatsu brothers stormed her family home. They terrorized her parents, making the lethal consequences of her defiance crystal clear. Shiori recorded every sickening threat. The next morning, she brought that smoking gun to the Agio police. She had the tapes. She had the proof. She had months of documented terror. The police told her to go away. She returned the next day, only to be ignored again. But the officers did more than nothing. They committed a felony by tampering with her formal complaint. They downgraded her desperate cry for help into a trivial note, filed away to gather dust and disappear. They buried her alive. For 4 months, the brothers flooded her neighborhood with hundreds of filthy, slanderous posters. They poisoned her reputation, making every waking moment a psychological prison. Then came that fateful October 26th. While the mastermind staged an alibi in Okinawa, a hitman named Kubota waited with 20 million yen in blood money and a sharp knife. Shiori never reached her class. Following the tragedy, the Saitama police didn't hang their heads. They didn't admit their lethal negligence. Instead, they leaked poison to the press, painting Shiori as a greedy girl who lived a double life as an escort. Pure character assassination, but a journalist named Koshi Shimizu wouldn't let the lie stand. He hunted the truth, tracking the lead stalker across the country to Hokkaido. His scathing expose in Focus magazine tore the cover-up wide open, sending 3 senior officers to court. 6 more were hit with disciplinary action for their part in the betrayal. In 2003, the family won 5.5 million yen, but for Kenichi Ino, cash was never the cure. Before Shiori's blood was spilled, stalking wasn't even a crime in Japan. The law was a void. Her death forced a revolution. The Anti-Stalking Act was finally born in November 2000. That law has grown teeth, adding email threats in 2013, social media in 2016, and GPS in 2021. Bluetooth tracking was added in 2025. Today, Kenichi is 75 years old. He still walks into police academies, teaching the next generation how to stop a stalker before the knife comes out. His haunting summary of Shiori's death remains as powerful today as it was 25 years ago. The killer, the cops, and the media all shared the blame. Shiori was sacrificed by a system that chose to look away. Her tragic legacy forced new laws that shield the innocent today. Kaede Ariyama, a 7-year-old first grader in Nara City. She was the definition of kindness. She looked after her little sister and always helped her friends. On November 17th, 2004. She left school at 1 o'clock for home. It was a short mile walk, one she had walked many times before. Her abductor, Kaoru Kobayashi, was a delivery man who should have been in prison. In 1989, he was caught after preying on 8 different children. He received a suspended sentence, then nearly strangled another child in 1991. That second crime only cost him 3 years. After his 1995 parole, the system completely lost track of him. With no monitoring or sex offender registry, he became a total ghost. By September 2004, he was indicted for hurting a 6-year-old. He was out on bail, awaiting his court date. That morning, a fresh warrant was issued for unrelated financial crimes. His boss stayed silent to get his money back, leaving him free. At 10 a.m., the predator began his hunt, cruising for potential victims. By early afternoon, he reached a neighborhood he knew from a past job. He spotted Kaede walking alone, right near a local police box. Taken to his apartment, the little girl was reported missing by 7 p.m. At 8 p.m., her mother received a chilling photo. "I have your daughter." By midnight, her body was found in a ditch, miles from safety. A bathtub became her grave, but Kobayashi wasn't finished. Weeks later, he sent the family a terrifying new ultimatum. "Your infant daughter is my next target." He even bragged to tavern locals using her photos, claiming they were just images from the dark web. On December 30th, 2004, tower pings trapped him while he was out delivering the morning news. The very papers he carried announced his downfall. By the September 2006 trial, he remained chillingly indifferent. He demanded a quick execution to cement his legacy as the next monster of his era. The judge denounced the atrocity as a heartless, calculated nightmare with zero room for mercy. Death was his sentence, marking Japan's first such ruling for this specific crime since 1983. On February 21, 2013, the state hanged Kaoru Kobayashi at the Osaka Detention Center. He was 44 years old. The murder of little Kaede forced a whole society to confront the shadows it had long ignored. The nation lacked any system to shadow sex offenders once they left prison. They were invisible. Half a year later, authorities finally started tracking the residential addresses and release dates of known child predators. By 2023, over 2,500 criminals were under surveillance. Japanese prisons finally introduced psychiatric treatment and rehabilitation, specifically for child predators. Impulse control therapy. These safeguards only appeared because a girl died at the hands of a monster released without any watch. Each November 17th, her elementary school holds a solemn assembly where everyone falls silent. 7 tolls of the bell echo her short life. Flowers still cover her desk in the principal's room. Even now, fearful parents never let their children walk to school unaccompanied. 20 years on, her father, Shigeru, shared a heart-wrenching diary of his grief. 2 decades of missing her have been a desperate crawl, where every single step feels impossibly heavy. The survivors endure an unspeakable torment. This concludes our grim update. Thanks for lingering. Press here for the horror.